Hello friends. Almost 20 years ago, this channel makes me feel old sometimes because I keep talking about myself and all my experiences way more than I do in real life, and it's like, that is so long ago. I need to go hang out with some boomers now just to feel young again. Anyway, when I was 23, I got very serious about wanting to get a literary agent and sell a book, so I could have a long and illustrious career as a novelist. I know 23 sounds young, at least if you are, like me, on the border of turning into a crone, but at the time I already felt ancient because I had been obsessed with the idea of wanting to be a writer since I was like 3, and everyone around me was going to college and getting degrees and seemed to be advancing in life, while I was stuck and felt very behind. So this video is about my journey to selling my first book. Hello, my name is Lydia Foxglove and I am a fantasy author. Welcome back to my channel. I've been getting a number of requests for this video. The story of how I got my first agent and sold my first book. Well, not like I ever had a second agent. Eventually I ended up moving into indie publishing, which is where I remain. But of course, many aspiring authors still dream of getting an agent and selling to a big publishing house, and I have a video about the pros and cons of both of those that I will link in the description. And of course, even if you just plan to go into self-publishing, this is really a story of perseverance and endurance, which is so important to all types of creatives. You probably heard that you need to go through a lot of rejections before you get a yes, and boy, oh boy, have I had my share. Let me paint you a picture of me at age 23. I had one book that I finished when I was 18. That was part of a dare that me and my friend had with each other to write a trashy teen novel over the summer. I had not finished one since. I didn't go to college, and I had just gotten a shiny new job at a health food and vitamin store that paid $7 an hour, which was still 50 cents more than I made at my previous job. So I'd been sitting on this book I wrote when I was 18, which, by the way, didn't really turn out to be a trashy teen novel. It was actually like, okay, but I didn't do anything with it. I didn't edit it. I didn't send it out. I just felt paralyzed, and I hadn't written another one. But I finally got to a point where perhaps I snapped just from coworkers asking me, so where do you go to school? Oh, you don't go to school. You just work here. I snapped and I was like, okay, I must do something with myself. I must finish a book and prove to the world that I am going to be a writer. And if I can't manage that in a reasonable time frame, I better think up a new career path. That wasn't just spreading the good word about how delicious Barbara's cheese puffs are, although they are. It was time to buckle down and focus on my writing. It would have been awesome if I'd had Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot that I've been trying out this week, and honestly, I have been insanely productive. Usually I struggle a lot switching between tasks throughout the day. Like, I tend to hyper focus on one thing, and if I have to do something else in the day, that just feels overwhelming and I often don't do it. This week I've been keeping up with YouTube. I've been writing. I even started tackling this massive organizational project in the basement that I've been putting off for months. And I've been sleeping really well. Like, what is happening? Are you really magic? And it has this little almost tingly feeling going down, which is really nice. I don't even know what ingredient is doing that, but it makes me feel like I'm drinking a magic potion. Like, my undead characters probably wish that their tonic was this pleasant. If you want to give Magic Mind a try, use my code CozyCreative20 and the link in the description. You can try it risk-free because it has a 100-day money-back guarantee, and see if it makes you want to clean out your entire disaster basement. I don't even know if that was the intention. It just says sharper mind, lower stress, better energy, and not clean house, but so I wish I had a magic potion when I was 23, but I just had smoothies I made with the produce that was about to go bad, and my dreams. So I started by sending out the book I wrote when I was 18. I edited it to the best of my ability, which at the time wasn't much, and I researched agents and made a list of the best prospects. And how do you make a good list of agents? Well, obviously things have changed quite a bit. At the time, a lot of agents still wanted queries sent through the post office, which, I don't know what website or resource is like the best one for researching agents right now, but one thing that never changes is you want someone with a vibe that matches yours, who's looking for books or has taste in books that aligns with what you write. And you also want a good compatibility personality-wise and with their working style. If they're editorial, you want to click with their editorial suggestions. And it's worth considering whether you even want an agent that's editorial or moderately or heavily editorial, because they really range. And then there's the other aspect of finding an agent, which is, if possible, you really want to get the gossip. Any other querying writers or writers represented by the agents that you're interested in that you can talk to or make friends with, because you will start to hear things about certain agents. Sometimes it's a rumor that turns into the agent's entire career collapsing, and sometimes it's just like a little red flag depending on what your personality is or what your circumstances are. Like maybe this agent is known for being really excited when they sign with you, but kind of dropping you if your first book doesn't sell. That isn't necessarily you totally don't want to sign with them, but it's not like a great perk, and you do want to be aware of that going in for sure. So feel free to gossip. This is one case where gossip away, I say. But no matter how much research you do, and no matter how great an agent you may sign with, you should be aware that there is a lot of turnover with authors and agents. Don't think of this like a marriage. It's pretty common when you're a new author, you're so grateful just to have anyone want to spend time helping you with your career, that I have seen many a writer not leave a bad agent. And they know it's not working, but they're just so scared. Will I get another agent? Am I being unreasonable? So try not to fall in love with your agent, and I'll circle back to that in a little bit. So I sent out the queries on the first book, and of course, I pretty much just got all rejections. I think I might have gotten like one response that was personal but brief, where they actually gave me a few reasons for the rejection. And when you're just starting, even a personal response is pretty rare and special, and it can be very valuable feedback. Like, agents don't know everything, but they do see a lot of manuscripts, like more than any critique partner that you have had. And they are talking to editors, so they have a good finger on what works and what doesn't work. And I would definitely weight their feedback a little heavier than most people. If it does give you a very gut, like, no way reaction, then, I don't recommend ever listening to that, but it's definitely a bonus if an agent gives you some personal feedback when you're early on in querying. Almost immediately, the first book just felt dead. I just knew it wasn't great. So I wrote a new book that was set in my Hidden Lands world, and it was a disaster. Even as I was writing it, I felt that I had no way of selling this. There was no place in the market for this book. I just didn't really have a handle on how to write about my fantasy world. So now, for the first time, I tried to write a book with the idea of the pitch in mind before I started the book. And frankly, this is a lesson I have not forgotten since. It's often really hard to sell a book if you wrote it without thinking about how you were going to pitch it whatsoever. If you've ever done this and you're sitting there trying to write a query letter or a blurb, you probably felt that feeling of, how do I sell this? How do I describe this in a way that people will actually want it? It's really good to think about that up front. And I could already feel that this book was going to be better than the last two. I poured everything into it. This was Magic Under Glass, the story of an immigrant girl in a somewhat Victorian-inspired fantasy world who is hired by a wealthy gentleman and falls in love with a man trapped in the body of a clockwork man. I'm being a little vague because those are some of the few elements that carried from this first draft to the one that eventually got published. it went through a lot of changes, like a ton of changes. Like for those few of you who have read Magic Under Glass, the love interest, Eris the Clockwork Man, originally was not even the love interest or a Clockwork Man. He was Namira's fun ghost friend. And as I was writing, I realized that the fun ghost friend was a better match for her than the Clockwork Man, who was a different character, so I just made them one character. But when this first version was done and I wrote the query, it just felt different. It felt compelling. One of the most common questions in writing is, how do you write a good query letter, a good blurb? And what I would do back then is just sit down, and there used to be like an agent blog where she would post a bunch of query letters people sent her and critique them. You can find similar things on Reddit now, but I would just sit down and I would like read those query letters for like an hour before I sat down to write mine, because I would start to get this sense for the rhythm of the few where I was like, ooh, that sounds really good. It's not many, and like, what is the unifying thread in the ones that are good versus the many that just start to glaze. It would put me in the mindset of the agent who was going to read the query letter. There has to be something intriguing. The writing needs to be very tight, and there has to be some sense of voice and character, and you don't want to get bogged down in every little detail. That's like my quick and dirty advice for query letters as well as blurbs if you're self-publishing, and I might do a whole video on it at some point. But anyway, I sent out queries with my carefully researched list of agents. Some of them were the same ones I'd already sent the previous book, because this was a very different book. And like a whole year had gone by almost. And just as writing the book felt different and writing the query felt different, the response was immediately very different. I got a lot of interest. I would get like 3 requests for a full for every like 10 queries I sent out. And this was so exciting. It felt so different from the last time. I could barely concentrate for like months. Every time I heard the little email sound, every time I checked the mail, my heart would flutter. Is this gonna be my moment? No, it was not my moment. It was not even close to being my moment. So mostly I got rejections, and every time I got a rejection, I would send out another query to keep about 10 at any given time. A lot of them were still impersonal, but I did get one pretty good letter of feedback and kind of an invitation to resubmit. I had finished Magic Under Glass in January of 2006, edited it in February of 2006, and then in summer of 2006, I ended up revising it based on that letter from the agent. I sent out more queries. I just kept sending out queries until I had almost exhausted the list of agents that I felt might be a good match for me. It was probably like 70 agents or something. And if I was querying now, I don't think I could find 70 agents that I would want probably anymore. But, you know, again, this is for lack of knowledge about some of the agents that I now know are like, probably not a good match for me based on what friends have said in the years since then. You know, when you're new, you don't know that. And after all these rejections, I had almost pretty much given up on Magic Under Glass. Then one morning in 2008, it's like 2 years later, I woke up in the morning with a sudden epiphany of how to rewrite the book and make it better and tighter. Sometimes you just gotta let time pass and keep working on other stuff, move on, and then you'll get the idea that allows you to fix the earlier thing based on the knowledge you've gathered over time. So I rewrote it again, totally from scratch. At this point, enough time had passed and the book had changed so much that some of the agents that I queried the first time, I felt like I could query again, and there were also new agents that had popped up in those 2 years. So I sent out another batch of queries. The cycle began again. I probably ended up sending out like 30 queries for this version ultimately. It was now spring of 2008, so I'd originally started querying Magic Under Glass in like late winter of 2006. So over 2 years had passed. 3 years since I had queried my original book. I had been living the query life now for 3 years. And during this time, I had made a lot of friends. And in those 3 years, some of these friends ended up getting agents, selling books. Some of their books were coming out soon. It was very crushing. I look back now and it seems like we all kind of sold books at the same time. But when I was 25, it felt like an eternity to be a year behind a friend, or even 2 years. It just felt like I was a huge failure, and I was really going through cycles of tears and sadness and depression and having to like pep talk myself, or Dade would give me a pep talk, pick myself back up, keep going, keep writing, keep revising. It was hard. And then we get to May of 2008. I still have the email. It's like one of the very oldest emails in my inbox. I queried Jennifer Loughran at the Andrea Brown agency. She was a very new agent, and she was a frequent participant on a children's writer message board that I frequented at the time. I really liked her personality, and even though she was so new, I think she only had like 4 or 5 clients. Andrea Brown was and remains a super reputable agency for children's and young adult. So I knew she'd have a lot of contacts and a lot of experienced agents around her. I still think to this day that is an ideal situation if you can get it. A young and hungry agent who is surrounded by more experienced agents with excellent industry contacts. So I wrote to her, "Dear Jennifer, this is Life on Mars from the Blue Boards again." Yes, that was my handle there. Shout out to Bowie. "Since your first call for queries post, where you mentioned an interest in the Victorian era, I've been wishing I had this book revised to send you. Well, the revision is now done, so I wanted to offer it to you now. Magic steeps the gaslit lanes of New Sweeling, where Namira is a foreign singer paid barely enough to survive. When wealthy sorcerer Holland Perry hires her to accompany a piano-playing clockwork automaton, she thinks her savior has arrived. Holland may treat her with the kindness and respect she's yearned for, but buried secrets stir, including a rumor he may have murdered the former head of the Sorcerers' Council on the brink of a peace treaty with the fairies. Namira discovers the spirit of a dashing fairy gentleman named Eris is trapped inside the automaton's stiff limbs, waiting for someone to break his curse. As Namira and Eris fall into a love that seems hopeless, Namira must uncover the truth behind the councilman's disappearance, or not just her fate, but all the magical world may be in peril. Set in an alternate Victorian era, Magic Under Glass is a YA fantasy with a Jane Eyre atmosphere, complete at 65,000 words. I've attached the first 3 chapters per your guidelines. Thank you very much for your time." So that was my winning query letter. June 6th, she emailed me back asking for the full. And then a month later, she said, "I love this and I want it." She had to get Andrea, the head of the agency, on board first. So she had to wait for the agency meeting, which was very agonizing. It was hopeful enough that I got to inform the other agents who had the book that I had serious interest. And when this happens, suddenly, like, everybody wants you. It's wild. I mean, it doesn't always happen, but it happens pretty frequently that you'll go from nobody wants you, nobody's giving you the time of day, to suddenly you're juggling multiple offers and phone calls, and it's like, whoa, what? So the other agent who had given me the original revision suggestions on the first version of Magic Under Glass, she had the new version. And normally I do think that going with the person who makes the offer and is the most excited often ends up being the best move. But in this case, I did feel there was something worth considering with this other agent, because she had been the first agent ever to give me positive feedback on the book and treat it like it had some real merit, and she'd like to see it again. And she was kind of a hot agent at the time. So I talked to them both on the phone. And it's so funny to think back on this, because my phone call with Jen was like kind of brusque and awkward almost. And then I had this like long and lovely conversation with the other agent. So on paper, it would seem a no-brainer that I should have gone with the other agent. But my gut said otherwise. I had this gut feeling with Jen that her enthusiasm was very authentic and that she was really going to be an advocate for me, that I could really trust her. And there was something about the other agent where she was super nice and easy to talk to, but I just didn't get the same gut feeling that she was going to be the best advocate for my career. Also, I must say in general that like Jen is a delight. She's like a character in a children's book from like the 70s, like an eccentric book character who is grown up and still has the same personality, like Harriet the Spy or something. She's like the perfect person to be in the children's book industry. Such a character, funny. I still love her. So thank goodness for my good instincts about people, because like a week later there was this scandal moment where like almost all the clients of that other agent left her in like the same week, and then these rumors kind of bubbled up about all kinds of problems. I don't have the full story, but like it would have been a disaster. I can certainly tell that much. Like I dodged a serious bullet there. So I signed with Jen, and after that things moved very quickly. She is not an editorial agent. She just sent it right out. And that is another spot where compatibility with your agent is very important, because sometimes I wonder, would the book have sold for a higher dollar amount, or would it have been a better book if Jen had been more editorial? And there's no simple answer to that question. It can be easy to think maybe this needed another round of edits before it went to editors. But on the other hand, I also know people who signed with some notoriously editorial agents who did like revision after revision after revision, and by the time I got to an editor, they were so exhausted of their book. And then it hasn't even hit like the person who's bought it yet, so then they go through more revisions. And for me, I would rather have the no edits agent than the write the whole book over again before it even goes out. But that's something that you really have to think about for yourself, because some writers really want to keep pushing themselves, want to keep working with the same book and make it the best it can possibly be before they even think about moving on. And other people are just gonna get so burned out working on that same book that even if like structurally you might improve it, you're gonna lose your spark and enthusiasm, and like it's gonna drain the life out of the book. So like 2 weeks after Jen signed me, she sent the book out to her initial list of editors, and 24 hours later or so, she emailed me like, hey, just FYI, the editor from Bloomsbury says she adores the book. She's showing it to marketing. 24 hours, not too shabby. And I was like, and then it went silent from Bloomsbury for like 2 weeks. Didn't hear anything. In fact, I didn't hear anything at all for almost 2 weeks from anybody. And then Jen emails me and says that she was hanging out with an editor from Random House at a conference, and she started chatting with him, and she's like, hey, I have this book. You might like it. I actually already sent it to your colleague, but maybe you'd be more interested in it. So he emails her and said, holy hell, I'm loving it. Only a third in, but we'll be sharing today for the record. I'd love to see anything you have that exhibits such skill and sensitivity in the writing. Like, wow. Even reading that now, I'm like... And that same day, got a rejection. Got my first flat-out rejection. Got another rejection. 2 days later, another rejection. And then the day after that, heard back from Random House. There's been a lot of talk about Magic Under Glass over here. After being absolutely riveted by the first third, I was disappointed by the rest of the manuscript. However, colleagues of mine are enthusiastic about the manuscript and its entirety. They see its flaws, but have a vision to fix them and are motivated to do so. That's good news, but it's really too bad that one of the enthusiastic colleagues didn't send the email instead. So that was like, yay! And I got another rejection that same day. And then 4 days after that, Jen called me and said, I have an offer from Bloomsbury. And a funny thing about that call, I still remember she told me the offer, and like I had this number in my head that was how much I needed to quit my job. And I had just been like, that's what's gonna happen. And she told me the offer, and it was like pretty close, but not there. So when she told me, I had this reaction kind of like, that's not right. I have the number and that's not quite it. And guess what the ultimate offer was? It was exactly the terms that I had in mind. Ultimately, we got 3 offers, and it was a no-brainer to go with Bloomsbury, because that editor was the first one to be excited, and she was just unabashedly excited. And she was great to work with. So that is the story of how my debut novel sold, and it just gives you an idea of how fortunes can rise and fall in a creative life. The agent and the book deal happened so quickly, but with some like real ego knocks in those whirlwind few weeks. And all that activity came after 3 years of like nothing better happening than a very occasional revise and resubmit request. Even though I have now moved to self-publishing, this was a very nostalgic video to make. I ended up looking at my old emails and my old live journal entries to reference it, and I still see a lot of the lessons that I learned applying to my career nowadays and how I grew in this time frame. I hope you enjoyed this look back with me too, and wherever you are in your creative career, I'm hoping you have some moments of big excitement, some big wins, but also know in the scheme of things, that one moment is pretty isolated and doesn't really matter. It is only one tiny little piece of a career. And before I go, I want to touch upon the idea that it is okay to break up with an agent. If I had signed with that other agent, it would have been awful, and I would have had to have figured out how to break up with her almost immediately. Instead, I had a wonderful 7-year partnership with Jen, and ultimately I moved on because my heart was really with the Hidden Lands books, and I needed to find a way to tell those stories, and it wasn't really working with Jen or really in traditional publishing at all. And I continued to struggle with that part for a while, as I've chronicled in other videos, but I also ended up doing much better financially in self-publishing. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is taking a big leap in a new direction. Thank you so much for watching, and if you would like more from me, make sure to subscribe to either my Patreon or my Substack. Same content on both in the free tier. I make some posts now and then, and if you sign up for the $5 tier, then you get access to one bonus video a month, my Discord server where I have a monthly dedicated chat and we talk about all kinds of stuff on a daily basis. I'm working on a video now that's just about working with editors for my Patreon and Substack members. But I appreciate each and every one of you for being here, and I'm so grateful to Magic Mind for letting me try their wizardry. So check out their link, and I will see you next time. Bye! Which is so important to all types of creative types. It would have been awesome if I'd had the cat knocked over my prop. That's revise and resubmit request.